Hey guys, Jason here with the One Stop How To Guys, bringing you episode 2 in our series all about Get. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about the 6 major stages that our files can be in within our Get repository. Those stages are, on the major scale, untracked, tracked, or ignored. And on the micro scale, they are either staged, unstaged, or committed. Now, on the major scale, we have untracked, which means that Git is aware of the fact that these files exist within the system, but they aren't tracked under version control yet. Tracked means that Git is not only aware that these files are in the file system, but also that they are tracked under version control. The final option on the major scale is that they could be completely ignored. And there are ways of telling Git, hey, I know this file's here, but I don't want you to pay any attention to it. And a lot of times we use that for files that maybe contain database credentials or other API secrets. And we just don't want those committed so that they can be shared all around the internet. On the micro scale, files can be unstaged, which means that they have changes that have been taken place within the file, but they have not been set to be staged to be committed to the repository. And we'll talk about a little bit more of that in the future here. The second set is that they are staged, that we're saying, okay, we've made these changes and now we're about to let Get know about them to commit them to the repository. The staging environment allows us to review files and review our changes before we actually commit them to our Git repository. And then, of course, the final stage there is that they are committed and those changes are now a part of our local repository. All right, so let's dive in and see what Git does know about our project. And to see what Git knows about our project, we can run a command called git status. And it's going to return to us this little message here. Index.html is in red, and there are a couple of things that it's telling us right now. In this phase, this file is untracked, and we talked about that. It means that this file is known in the file system, but Git isn't actually tracking it in its version control yet. It also knows that this file has been modified in some way. And I want to go back to our Visual Studio Code here and show you what exactly it knows about this. Before, this file didn't exist in our Git system because it's been untracked. And now it knows that all of these items have been changed. So Git knows a little bit about what's going on, but because this is an untracked file, it's saying this whole file is new. And we'll take a look at what happens when we modify one. But as of right now, this file is in the untracked, unstaged life cycle of our Git project. To add this to our staging area, we can do a git add command. And now git add can kind of function in several ways. We can say git add index.html, and it will add this index.html to our get staging area. Now, that's okay if you just want to add a single file at a time. But let's say that we had 15 or 16 different files here. We wouldn't necessarily want to have to add them all individually like this. So there is another command that we can run called git add period. And what that means is add all of the files to the staging area. Right now, it doesn't matter. We only have the one file. But if we do a git status now, Git is telling us that there are changes ready to be committed. And the changes that are ready to be committed are that we have this new file called index.html. And if we come over here to this visual representation of this, we can see that it is now officially staged. So we've now said, hey, Git, you recognize that this file was in the file system and it wasn't tracked yet. And we're saying, go ahead and track this file now, and it's staged and ready to be tracked. So how do we get it tracked within the file system, and the Git repository? Well, we use a command called git commit. And git commit has several options that need to be passed to it. One is the -m flag, which means I want to add a message. And the message is within quotation marks, and we can say adding the index.html file to git tracking. And then we hit enter, and Git says, okay, there was one file changed, there were 14 insertions, and it created that. And in our visual representation, we can see that that kind of just went away. And nothing looks really different here, but we now have history within our Git repository. And we can actually view that history, and this history can give us a good indication of when things changed or when things maybe went wrong. And we can do that by doing a git log. And this will tell us that on January 17th, if there was a commit made to this Git repository, and it was adding the index.html file to Git tracking. Now, there's also some things like the git commit hash, and we'll talk about what all these things are in future tutorials as we start learning about rolling back to different commits. We're not going to cover that right now. And if this is a little bit verbose, we can also do git log one line, and that's going to give us a shortened hash as well as just the commit message. And that's helpful if you're trying to read back through 30, 40 commits. It just makes it a little cleaner. So now let's take a look at another example of this. Let's go ahead and change the title here to, to welcome to Get. And we'll save that. If we do a git status now, the message is going to look a little different. It's not going to say new file, it's going to say that this file has been modified. There are also some additional information here about resetting this file and discarding changes, but we're not going to worry about that right now because we're going to cover that in future tutorials. But if we go back to our visual editor here, we can actually see what has been changed here. We could see that this one particular line has been changed, and we're gonna cover how we can do this through the terminal also in future lessons using the git diff command, but we're not going to worry about that right now. I'm just showing you how a file moves through the life cycle. So we can once again do a git add, and this time we'll do index.html just to show that it functions the same way. Git status again, to see that that file is now added to our staging area. So then we can do a git commit -m, and we're going to say changed the title tag. And we're going to then come back here and see that's gone. We can also confirm that it's gone by doing a git status again, and it should tell us that there is nothing, no changes, nothing to be committed. But if we do that git log one line again, we can see now that we have two commit messages and that there have been changes. So let's run through one more example of the life cycle. It's very common within a project to have a CSS directory, and within that CSS directory, we have a new file called styles.css. So now we have added an untracked folder, and we've added an untracked file. So if we do a git status now, it's going to tell us that there's this new untracked folder called CSS. It's not really giving us the contents of that folder right now, but we'll see when we add it to the staging area that it does. So it's giving us that message again, hey, you have untracked files. We are in the untracked life cycle. If we do a git add all, and then do that git status again, it's going to tell us, oh, you now have changes staged and ready to be committed, which is this new file called styles.css. And actually, if we come back in here and we change this title real quick to welcome to Get, I want to show you the difference in the messages here. So get status, we can see that we have a modified file now. It's not a new file. So we're going to get add all. Another get status. And we can see here these two next to each other. This is saying, hey, this is a new file we didn't know anything about before. And here's a file that we did know something about, and it's been changed. So git commit, we're going to add a new message here, which is changed h1 title, and add CSS file. Git log, we'll do a one line again. And we can see that we now have this good change history. So we've seen a file go from being untracked to staged to be tracked to committed and tracked. And then we also saw a file go from tracked to modified to staged and committed. And now we can see how this file is weaving its way through the life cycle. Now, if we do a git log here, just the full version, I want you to be able to see the difference, see how much longer this is, and if you had 30, 40 commits in your history, how long this could get. And that's just really the difference between the one line and the not one line. Now, there are ways of staging a file to be committed and then deciding, I don't want those changes. And we can roll those changes back. We can unstage it, make more changes, and then restage it. Or we can reset the file entirely to its last known committed state. And if we do that on a file that is untracked, uncommitted, sometimes we'll lose that file entirely. But we're going to cover that in the next episode. Right now, it's very important that we can see how a file goes from untracked to tracked, how it goes from unstaged to staged to being committed. We're also going to cover that get ignore stuff in future tutorials. I just don't want to overwhelm you too much right now. So right now, that's the life cycle. That's how you get a file committed into your Git repository. And we're going to see what kind of magic we can do with all of that in the future. So don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next episode. See you later, guys.